science. So on that note, it is 5:31. I'm going to shift over to Rabbi Scott Hoffman. And Rabbi Scott Hoffman, in his bio, I should put Rabbi Dr. Scott Hoffman, because he, in addition to graduating from JTS, earned a PhD in Talmud and Rabbinics at NYU under Jeffrey Rubenstein, who was his classmate at JTS in 1991. He's been an instructor in Rabbinics at Lisk College. His interest extends beyond Talmud and Midrash to literary analysis of biblical stories, as we're going to learn Rahab Revisited. And he's currently the Rabbi B'nai Shalom of Olney, Maryland. And a fun fact that I know about him, he is an avid marathon runner. Rabbi Hoffman, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And you know, we can be first name here, really. So thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate it. I want to mention just briefly, because I can't resist it. You know, yesterday was the 30th anniversary of my ordination. I was ordained on May the 16th, 1991. So, and on that particular day was a very interesting, we had a little graduation. It was Erev Shavuot for the religious school. And one of the grandparents in attendance wanted to introduce herself to me. She was visiting to New York. She said, perhaps you recall my first husband. She'd been married to her second husband very happily for, I don't know, 25 years or more. And her first husband was the late Professor Baruch Boxer, Zichrono Livracha. And I told her I was among his last class of students. And he perished tragically at the age of 44 in 1990. And he was a magnificent teacher. And I told her, not only do I remember him, I can exactly tell you what he taught us. I remember the materials, not all of it, but I remember a pretty good piece of it. And I'm very grateful to his teachings having enriched me and continuing to do so. So it's really nice to make that connection after 3 decades. But anyway, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about Rachav Revisited. I want to do a few things. I want to, first of all, look at the story and square what I consider a hermeneutic circle. I want to look at a certain basic power dynamic and how weirdly sometimes women can take over what would seem to be a male prerogative. Number 3, I want to show that this often is done with really positive results, really important results, really memorable results. And finally, I want to tie it back into Shavuot and specifically to the book of Ruth. So first of all, the jumping off point was we had a rabbinic yeshiva institute I recommend highly at Machon Hadar, and we studied the Rachav story, and suddenly I got a bee in my bonnet, and I wanted to square the classic hermeneutic circle, right? Why is Rachav as a zonah also the heroine of the story? I mean, and this is puzzled commentators, right, as ancient as the Targum and Rashi, right? She's the Zan, she's not a zonah, it's Zan, she's innkeeper, right? It's something more benign and innocent. Or simply that, you know, as Tikva Freimer-Kensky said in her very wonderful book about when the Bible, right, it's a sign more of otherness, of outsiderness. And, you know, she in fact she's the prostitute with the heart of gold, I think she calls it. And that's fine too. I'm okay with that. But I want to suggest that male sexual behavior is a way of projecting power and a way of projecting authority. And those who are zonah, paradoxically, have an ability to control male sexual behavior, and therefore they have a measure of power. There's a Soto Voce commentary on how strong that they are, stronger than other women, having a strength equal to or greater than men. So first thing I want to show you is that male sexual behavior is about power as much as it is about anything else, about the ability to project power, and sometimes successfully and other times not. So the list is not exhaustive. We only have 30 minutes, but I'll give you a few. The best example, or the first one that'll come into your mind, is this one. It says right in Bereshit, I will find the exact thing, right? 35, I'll give you the pasuk, it's 35:22. It says that Israel stayed in that land, right? And Reuven went and he slept with Bilhah, his father's Pilegesh, his father's concubine, and of course, Israel found out. So what's he doing? What is Reuben doing? Is he crazy? And the answer is he's crazy like a fox, although the plan backfires. If you want to understand a few of the chapters of Breshit, I recommend to you highly the essay by Judah Golden. It's called "Where Does Genesis 38 Belong?" Really wonderful essay. Professor Golden, right, spent his academic career at Yale and then later at Penn. He was also married to Dov Zlotnick's sister. If you're interested in the trivia, may he rest in peace, Professor Zlotnick, teacher of mine also. What he's doing, what those chapters are doing in Bereshit, is they're about how it is that Yehudah comes to be in charge, even though he's son number 4. And I'll get to him a little later. But if you think about it, Shimon and Levi take vengeance on the people of Shechem and Hamor, and that kind of takes them out of consideration, right? By Genesis 49, Shimon v'Levi achim kalei chamas mechero teichem b'sodam al tad bo nafshi b'kalam lo techak bodi, whatever, it's the whole thing. So they're out. And this is Reuben's attempt to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm in charge. If I have access to my father's wives, I'm the boss. But Israel found out. It didn't work, right? And what does he say, right? Mishkavi alita, right? Pachaz kamayim, you're unstable like water. You're not going to be in charge. So sons 1, 2, and 3 have excluded themselves from the possibility of inheriting their father's mantle. I'll get back to Yehudah, as I said, a little later. Here's one that's comical, you might know pretty well. I hope you'll think it's funny. Right? The Haftarah for, I believe it's the Haftarah for Chayei Sarah, right? The Melech, David, Zaken, Ba Bayamim, right? David is on his deathbed. And they have to find him a sochenet. They have to find him some kind of a nurse. Now, I'm based here in suburban Washington, D.C., not far from where I was born. I was born in Washington, D.C. And I tell you the truth, if heaven forfend I was a dying man, I'd call over to Holy Cross Hospital where I had surgeries over the years. And I'd get myself a nurse, but I'd get a nurse with some experience. You know, send me a nurse who's of a certain age, who's been doing this a while, but that's not what old King David did, is it now? They got him a sochenet, right? And she was a beautiful woman, right? And anyway, she had to look after him. They sought the whole territory to get a really beautiful woman. Now, that doesn't mean she didn't have some nursing skill. I don't know. She may have. But it's also clear that wasn't the only or primary responsibility for the job. Well, here's King David, Melech David. He's a dying man, right? And he may not have even been capable anymore. And they schlep in this beautiful young woman. Why? Because it's Melech David we're talking about. By the way, there's a funny midrash, you know, that when the text there says, you know, V'lo yicham lo, he couldn't get warm. It could be he had hypothermia, Raynaud's, but I wonder if it's a euphemism for impotence. And if it is, the midrash is kind of picking up on it. It says that it's in the Gemara, and I'm sorry I didn't write down citation, but anyway, it says, you know, some people said, hey, King David can't, you know, be intimate with this young girl. Come on. So he actually had Abishag, Ashunamid, brought before him, and he was intimate with her 7 times just to prove that it was true, right? It means that your mind is going exactly to that place. It's about appearances. He has to appear virile, less comical in the life of Melech David. Less comical. That during the rebellion of Avshalom, right, David has fled, he's run away, he's gone from the city, and one of the advisors who's left behind is a man named Achitopel, and Achitopel is really a very smart guy. And he says, you know, what should I do, Achitopel, now that my father is on the run and I'm here in a palace? What should I do? Sleep with your father's wives publicly. That'll prove you're the king. Many other examples. This is all a sort of an attempt on his part to grab power. Now, what about the specific instance, right, of Zonah? What is unique about Zonah? Zonah, what is so unique is that, you know, you are negotiating sexual expression and granting or withholding it from men depending on the conditions. You have an opportunity to set the ground rules for this whole thing, right? You have the opportunity to say yes or no. That's a unique opportunity that conveys great power and authority to somebody who wields it. It also indicates, by the way, it indicates a certain comfort level in the domain, in the public domains, I should say, of men, right? That you're a person who is okay being in a setting which we think of as male. Here's one you might recall. There were two women who came to King Solomon. They came to Amelch Shlomo, and they came to the king. And the first woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house. I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. On the third day I was delivered. This woman also gave birth to a child. There was no one else there. This woman's child died because she lay on it. She rose and took my son," right? You know the story very well, right? And which is the true mother of this child? Which is the true mother of this child? And right, you know, King Solomon says, "Okay, listen, give me a sword. We'll go half-half." That's, you know, as if it were a thing. And the one woman says, "No, no, no, right? Don't do that, right? Give her the better. You should give it to her and leave the child alive." And that proves he's the mother. How are these women described? They're described the following way: Az tavona shtaim nashim zonot el hamelech v'tamod na lefanav. There were two zonas standing in the court. Now we have a colleague, I believe, I want to say it was our colleague at Spanish, Mark Angel, and he wrote a very lovely piece, which I saw, you know, and what his point was, well, it proves that the court of King Solomon was open, and even a zonah could go in there, and that may be, but I think it's something more at work. These are two women who are accustomed to being in the presence of men, and they're good at negotiating in the presence of men, and they know about how to negotiate in the presence of men. And I'm going to go now to, of course, the one I was alluding to, and that is the case of Tamar and Yehudah. Right? Now you'll say to me that you remember that what started this whole thing was that Yehudah, right, thought she was a prostitute, and they have this affair. And I want to show you a little bit about the power, something that may escape a lot of people. It says that, you know, remember, they're doing the price. And he says, "Well, I don't have a wallet, basically, I don't have my money with me." Well, what would you like as a security deposit? And what does she say? She says, right, right, you have to give me the signet, the notary seal. We found a few of those in archaeological digs, by the way, these little signet seals, and they were worn on your neck, and then you carried it around on your neck. Only a noble person had that. And give me your staff. And give me your staff. That is the ancient equivalent, if you will, of asking a gentleman for his Rolex and his black Amex, right? Well, that'll do. Well, think about what she gave and what did he try to give her for payment? A goat. Remember? Send the goat. Well, I don't know how much goats cost, but if Chad Gadya is an indication, they weren't very expensive. Okay, a goat wasn't all that much, right? It was 2 zoos, according to the song. In other words, she negotiated a heck of a security deposit now, didn't she? Right? Give me your cord and your signet seal, because she had the ability to project power. And I'll ask you, remember the twins come out, and remember the one who comes out first, right, is Zerah, and she puts the shani, she puts the string, the colored string, I guess reddish or purplish, whatever color it is exactly, on him, a crimson they call it, right? And he's called Zerach, but then the other one, Peretz, manages to come out first, you know, during some point during the birthing process, keep your eye on the string. And now we're going to go to the story, and then I'm going to tie this back to Shavuot. So in the story of Rechav Zonah, right, one of the things that, as I said, is punished people, why is it that, she seems righteous and even pious, and yet, engages in the world's oldest profession? And again, I don't think that is where they are going with it. She is a very canny woman, is she not? Right? She hides the spies and secrets them at some risk for herself. And why does she do that? Because she believes, in fact, she knows, that these folks are going to come in and conquer the city. She knows that she believes that the Israelites will prevail. She believes that if they do prevail, they're going to wipe everybody out. So she knows which horse she ought to bet on. Because even if she turns them in, she may have a feeling, if I turn them in, who knows what happens? They may conquer the city anyway, and I'm going to die along with everybody else. That's one possibility. But the other possibility, she hides them, and maybe she can, kind of do something for herself. And what does she do now? Of course, she does seem to be a true believer, right? We've heard how the Lord dried up the Suf, and we heard how you geschmeiced the 2 kings in Transjordan. We heard about that. So what does she do? She makes them give her a shvu'ah. She makes them take an oath. Okay, that's serious business, right? And they do it properly. And by the way, what do they tell her to do? What do they tell her to put in the window? Because she better not go out in the street and get confused with everybody else. They better know to mark the safe house. She puts the shani. She puts the thread. It's the same word. It comes up a number of times in the Torah. I looked it up in a concordance, by the way. It comes up, that word shani comes up about 40, 42, something like that times in the time. But about half of them are in describing the Mishkan and its materials. So if you knock those out, it's not that common of a word. Okay? It doesn't come up that many times. That's one with Yudan Tamar, and this is another with the spies and Rechav. This is another. So Rechav is a really, really powerful presence, right? She tells these men, I'll save you. She then is apparently a bald-faced and convincing liar to the men in the city, because they go on this wild goose chase, right, trying to pursue these guys down. And of course, they don't find them. She lies to the messenger of the king himself. And then she makes darn sure that they're not reneging on that promise. Because how does she know they're going to deliver it? Well, they took the shvuah very, very seriously. This was not a joke, right? When you made an oath, that was something serious. And she gave them a sign, right? She tied the crimson, vatikshur tigvat ashani b'chalom. She put that thread into the window, right? And the same way they put the crimson thread. So my argument, and I'm compressing this way too much, but because I want to go to another point. My argument is that Rechav is not diminished potentially by her roles as Zonah, whatever that might exactly mean. Actually, it just shows me that she is in a position where, fortuitously, principle, right, and belief coincide. They're the same. They're one and the same. Principle and profit, that's the expression I wanted. Principle and profit are one and the same. What's beneficial to me is also what I happen to believe. That doesn't diminish her status. I think it's actually further proof of her validation. Her belief system had morphed into a certain point where it also ended up, as far as she knew, working toward her benefit, inuring to her benefit. So now I want to go back a little bit to you, Dan Tamarna, and that's because of where we are in the calendar, right? So we know that what really happens in the narrative arc, and this is to go back to Golden's point, of Bereshit, in those chapters, I mentioned Shimon and Levi are out because of the Dinah incident. Reuben's out because he tried to sleep, or he slept with Bilhah, and his father found out. What about Yehuda? Yehuda, let's remember, starts down here and Reuben down here. When they have Yosef in the pit, one might kind of say, right? Maybe when they have Yosef in the, and they're going to sell him or something like that, maybe so. And where does that happen? It happens. Oh, it happens. So who's the good guy? The good guy is Reuben, more or less, right? He says, "What'd you guys do? You sold him into slavery. It was just a joke. I was going to give him back. What's the matter with you guys?" Well, but he's really kind of out anyway. It's not really helping him. And then in the end of the book, he gets worse, right? Hey, don't worry, Dad. Send Benj with us, and if it doesn't work out, you'll kill my two sons, two of your grandchildren. Yeah, that's going to work out. But in any case, he's kind of good. But Yehuda is the one who masterminded the sale, isn't he? Isn't he the one who masterminded the sale? So he's down here. But guess what? He ignores his duty to his children, and the one who calls him out on it is someone he believes to be Zonah. It's Tamar, calls him out on it. And then what he says, Tzadkam mimeni. This is the beginning of his process of teshuvah, of turning things around, which culminates in his pleading for his brother Binyamin before Yosef. That's the beginning of the turnaround, which was affected by a woman, at least at the time, that he took to be Zonah. Wow. But it gets better. Because, of course, one of those children is Peretz. And then, of course, when you open the book of Ruth, which we'll read in a little while, depending on where you are, how many hours. And what's the line of Ruth? They trace it back, of course, to Peretz, and then on down through the generations, and all the way to Ishai, and then I suppose to, then of course to David HaMelech. So the point I want to make is this, that and these two incidents, both generated by the actions of women who stood in what we might think of initially as a compromised position, were actually the drivers behind the inheritance of the land of Israel, right? They're the beginning of Kibush Haaretz. That's when we realize this is going to work, when Rechav Zonah joins our side, as it were. And on the other side, both Ruth on one side and I suppose Tamar on the other, right, are going to be linked to the line of Beit David, of the house of David, the fullest realization in the history of Am Yisrael of our presence in our own land as a covenanted people. Quite an accomplishment for women that we think stood on the outside, but in some ways, by taking male power and redirecting it, they did so in a really beautiful and constructive way. So since it's 5:05, I'll take a question or two and thank everybody for really listening, because I've talked way too much, but that's okay. Ben?
No, so that was an interesting take, and I've thought a lot about this over the years, especially as we look at David's yichus. We see on one hand, he comes from Yehuda and Tamar and Peretz, so that's going to be the line of Boaz, which is his great-grandfather. On the other hand, we have Lot's daughter having incest. In both cases, we have incest. We have incest with, in Judah's case, the father-in-law, daughter-in-law, and in Lot's case, with the father and daughter, and creates Moab, Ruth the Moabite. So I just wonder, in your research, as you look at this, what really in Judaism makes a person. We always emphasize so much in certain circles, yichas, oh, this is the son, the grandson. And for my take, it's always been not so much. That really doesn't matter. What matters is who you are and what you do with the opportunities that you're given.
Yeah, I've always thought that, yichus is overrated, maybe because I don't have any, but I also think, right, we've always tried to balance those things out, but David HaMelech was a shepherd, right? And even Shaul HaMelech, they pulled him out of the fields practically. So, we want to sometimes stress the humility. I think it does come down to, as they say, the intention or the quality of the person, right? As they say, right in the Talmud, Rachmana liba ba'eh, right? God only desires the heart and one's intention, right? One's thought process, makes a giant difference. What one is trying to accomplish out of it is, can be really, really can be key. What God wants to come out of it, and how the purity of our intentions can, drive away, a host of problems with of a more pragmatic or practical nature, like yichus. You can drive those away and supersede them, I suppose.
So I'll ask one more question, because your topic was Rahav, and I don't want to lose sight of that. Okay. So as the new host, my former roommate comes on, I'll ask you one more question here, which is this idea that Rahav, according to Midrash, marries Joshua. Yep. So the leader of our people is married to a zonah, a harlot, going back to the issue with Judah and Tamar. This emphasis on the world's oldest profession, so to speak, which is why the class of what they don't teach you in religious school, the X-rated Bible class. Yeah. So what that says, and whether Rahav would have been powerful in her own right if she didn't, according to Midrash, convert, whatever that means, and marry Joshua.
Well, I think that maybe the Midrash is hinting at the same thing I am, that, how literally you want to take it is up to you, but that the beginning, really, of the success of Yoshua and this Kibush Haaretz does indeed rest with Rahav being convinced of the success of this enterprise, of his enterprise, and basically by siding with us, she helps generate the success, the beginning of its success, and the confidence and assurance to do the rest, right? It's one thing, you don't want to lose the first game, If you lose the fifth game, it's all right. You'll come back if you've won a few others. So, I think that what they're saying is, in a sense, he may have been the most important person in that enterprise, but we shouldn't undersell the importance of those who may have acknowledged what was historically destined to unfold, and that they also contributed mightily to its success. And, maybe their otherness and outsiderness gave them the freedom of thought necessary to realize where history was really trending.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. Boker Tov.
Boker Tov to you, Rabbi.
Boker Or, I'm handing the reins over. Thank you, Rabbi Hoffman, or Scott. I know we're first names here, Scott Ben. I'm handing the reins to my former roommate, his last roommate before he tied the knots. All the way from Boston, Ravid Tillis. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ben.